Hey guys, I'm Adam with the Chance of Gaming podcast. Little Wars TV put out this really cool short video called
Today we're asking a question that everyone has heard in this hobby since the 1980s. Is historical wargaming in decline?
and I was utterly fascinated watching it, and I had so many comments to make and so many thoughts on it. I thought I would just do it in this format. I think this is what my kids call a reaction video. I don't know. I'm like 43. I don't know any of that shit. So, if you haven't watched it yet, please do. I think I can put a link like right around here somewhere, and maybe it's the Little Wars TV YouTube page. It's their latest video. So go check that out and then come back here and listen to my thoughts, please. First of all, is that the R-rated superstar Edge from the WWE? Maybe. Anyway.
The hobby is graying and new players just aren't entering fast enough. But is that actually true? In this video, Little Wars TV talks to game designers, miniature manufacturers, publishers, podcasters, and hobby shop owners. We'll ask them if the hobby is growing and what barriers they see to attracting more players. So let's start by assessing the overall state of the hobby in 2020. I'll start by talking to one of the best-selling wargame designers in the United States, who, ironically, has a somewhat dim view of the future of historical miniature gaming.
Hi, I'm Sam Mustafa. I'm a wargame author and publisher and a historian.
Sam, as one of the few major historical wargame publishers and designers left in the United States, we thought that you would be the perfect person to ask. Is historical wargaming dying?
If you look at, say, the hobby now as opposed to 25 years ago, the major brands, if you will, in historical tabletop miniatures gaming were primarily Americans. Right, so Scott Bowden, the Empire series, Artie Conliffe and his games, published by Dave Wextel, the Fire and Fury, Rich Hasenhauer, those guys, Avalon Hill with Napoleon's Battles, et cetera, Frank Chadwick, GDW.
Sure.
I believe every single one of those is out of print, right? Or hasn't been active in at least 20 years.
Right, Fire and Fury is still in
actually
in a second edition.
You're right, you're absolutely right. So,
but for the most part, most of those operations have kind of folded up as businesses.
and so walk through the dealer area right now, right? And as I just did, and tell me if you can find a single made in America production there that wasn't there last year. Or to the year before that. Right? Where is the new stuff being produced by America? Now, maybe I missed a few. That's entirely possible. I'm not omniscient. But most of the new product is coming from overseas, where the hobby seems to be quite healthy, right? In Australia, New Zealand, Britain, on the European continent. But again, walk through that dealer hall and tell me, what is the average age you see in that dealer hall? There was a poll done recently on a big miniatures chat site, and it was just self-selection, but the poll found, I think, average age of the respondents was 58. That's average.
Right.
A couple years ago when I did Rommel, I guess that was 2 years ago, somebody reviewed it by saying I was one of the new up-and-coming names in the hobby.
That had to feel good, right?
I was 51 when that game came out, okay? So if I'm one of the new guys...
You're a young buck, 51.
Exactly. Then who the hell is the old guard?
Yeah.
So I think in the United States, historical tabletop miniatures gaming does appear to be dying out.
So how did that transition happen?
I think it's not a question of what happened, it's a question of what failed to happen, right? The hobby failed to attract a new generation of a significant number. I mean, now I bumped into David Enstenis just earlier, and he's younger than I am. I don't know how much younger, but at least 10 years younger than I am.
Oh, yeah.
And he's making a serious go of it. So, maybe soon you'll have someone else to say, you're the last man standing. But there doesn't seem to be, in the manufacturing publishing side of this, there doesn't seem to be a sort of replacement for the guys who were older than me. And the caveat here is that this is not based on statistics.
Right.
I don't have any data to support this. It's just anecdotal, so take that with whatever caution you may.
Speaking of data, if anybody has been sort of following our channel, then you know that we've been working with WSS Magazine, following the data from their Great Wargaming survey. Right. As far as we know, it's the only expansive source of hard data on the hobby. And the data there does show that the hobby is aging out. I think there's a lot of people that question, is it really graying? They were talking about it graying back in the 80s and the 90s, and we're still here.
That's because it was graying in the 80s and 90s. Right. When I started going in the 80s, I was in my late 20s, right? And everyone there had brown hair, right? And I'm still going. I still see the exact same guys, and we all have gray hair. Those of us who have hair, which is soon not to be me.
Well, thank you so much for giving some theories and talking about the state of the hobby.
Doom and gloom.
Well, maybe a little bit, but we've talked to a lot of other people in the hobby, other publishers, podcasters, hobby shop owners, game masters, and you're going to hear interviews from many of them as well as they weigh in with their thoughts.
Okay, there's a couple of good points there. The first one is the whole made in America. And it's just not anymore. You'll hear me talk about on my show all the time. Anytime I find a really cool rule set, I'm like, oh, great, where do I get this from? Sure enough, I have to import it, usually from the UK. And, I have to say, no, I don't pay VAT. Can you give me a regular price for it? And then it takes like 6 damn weeks to get here. And it's just a mess. I can't think of any actual miniature wargaming companies offhand in the US. I guess I should say major wargaming companies. There's a lot of smaller companies kind of doing stuff. I mean, honestly, like the major miniature gaming company I can think of is Privateer Press or Weird Games. That's War Machine and Malifaux, respectively. But for actual historicals, I can't think of anything offhand. I mean, there are guys like Sam there who make rules, yeah, sure, but actually that kind of do it all in one. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about, and why that's important. But we'll get to that in a minute.
Hi, I'm David from the Wargaming Company. That's what I got. That's who I am. That's what we do.
Hey, I know that guy. We interviewed him. Great guy.
I think the state of the hobby is changing significantly. I don't think it's in decline. I think it's likely growing, but it's not going to resemble the legacy of historical gaming. So historical wargaming is Bob sells me flags, David sells me some of the figures I need, Sally sells me other figures that I need, Jim sells me bases, but Alex sells me books, but not all of the books that I need. And none of the books are actually books for wargaming necessarily. I can get some history books that have some of the information I need for the scenarios, but those don't have maps. So then I need to find other books from George that have maps, because I need maps to lay out my table. Then I need other ones to find orders of battle so I know what troops are there. And then I need hundreds or thousands of uniform plates in order to figure out what I should paint these guys like. The biggest barrier for historical wargaming is the product, if you will, that allows people to game isn't ready out of the box, put together for somebody. It's not kitted.
Yes, that. 1,000 times that. That is probably the biggest hurdle for historical gaming to kind of do better, especially here in the US. Guys nowadays want just an all-in-one just company. They are so used to, thanks to 40K and a million other rule sets and miniature companies, everything is there. There's one company, and I get my rule book from there. I get my miniatures from there. I get my my army books from there. And just take a look at Warlord, how they do their historical games. It's all in one, pretty much. They also, they carry Perry stuff and whatever. But I guess a better example would be Battlefront with Flames of War. Now, when that first hit, I was there for first edition. I was so excited. Why was I so excited? I guess I should talk about what my first introduction to historical gaming was. So I found a local gaming club, and I walked into it just like, oh, wow, hey, guys, this is so neat. Oh, my gosh, is that Napoleonics? This is so cool. What rule set is that?
Huh, it's a rule set I made myself, because all the other rule sets get the French wrong. Oh, wow, can you teach me to play? No, I don't have time for teach a kid. Ha 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 ha. Oh no, I guess I'll go play 40K now.
So that was my experience with getting in. So when Flames of War launched, it was a breath of fresh air. One company that was right. I get the rule book. Oh my gosh, they sell the figures. They tell me how to put my army together. Where I was used to this whole thing of an HQ troops, all these selections that you had to buy to do this, and it was awesome. And so again, I try to bring it to kind of like the older crowd who I'd seen playing 15mm World War II. They were playing Command Decision, but I still tried to bring it to them, and it kind of went something like this.
Oh my gosh, guys, have you heard about this new rule set, Flames of War?
What? Let me see that.
Oh no, that's not historically accurate. No, that Sherman has the incorrect amount of rivets on it. That's terrible. I will never play that. Oh, well, who do I play with? I don't have anybody to play with. I guess I'll play 40K.
So, I mean, that, I imagine, is representative of at least a little bit of people's experience. And kind of why historical wargaming is where it's at now. Because that was in the late 90s for me. Late 90s, early 2000s. And so, when now, all these years later, I'm actually more interested in historicals. And, I've always been interested, but it's just always been difficult to find an opponent. Anywhere I went in the U.S., I could find a 40K game or a fantasy game. At one point, even like a War Machine game. But historicals, no. It was always kind of a small club that, maybe they weren't so friendly to outsiders, And, I'm into a lot of other more esoteric hobbies, I guess, like ham radio. And, it's the same thing. It's a lot of older guys that kind of, the hobby can die with them as far as they're concerned. They have no interest in that next generation kind of continuing on. But let's keep going.
Oh, crikey, isn't that it's a $3 million question, isn't it? I see the hobby as being surprisingly healthy. I think that it's had a number of scares over the last decade or two, and there have been a lot of kind of doom soothsayers who said, oh gosh, it's greying, it's going to fizzle out in the next 5 years. And they've all been proved wrong. There seem to be more manufacturers now than there ever were when you take into account all the stuff that's happening on stuff like Kickstarter, lots of crossover games, so there's people moving between kind of miniatures wargaming and the kind of board game world. There's a lot happening there. It strikes me that it's actually surprisingly, in rude health. Now, it would probably be going too far to say that it's growing. I wouldn't like to necessarily say that, but I think it's certainly holding its own.
Okay, two things. Number one, how did I not know Henry Hyde was British? Number two, yes, I believe it's healthy. I believe it's growing in the UK. There. In the US, I don't see it. I just don't see it in the US. Locally we play a little bit, and I'm not just talking locally. With my podcast, I cover a lot of different events and news and whatnot, and I don't see it, especially I don't see, new designers and new companies and whatnot that are making a big splash. Because, you've got to fight that Games Workshop giant. And it's fascinating to me that they can seemingly easily do it over in the UK. But over here, no, it's like a huge uphill battle.
Hi, I'm Brett Stoner. I started the Comic Store West in York, Pennsylvania. I think just historicals are just a tough sell for the main, because I don't think people are exposed to the history of it. The hobby store industry right now is tough. We're competing with Amazon, we're competing with the internet. For a store to sell historical miniatures, you need that alpha gamer who's into it, and it's tough. It's tough because people are going to go, it's bad enough with, fantasy, Warhammer comes to mind, to compete with that online. Historical, there's all these little companies making all, various scales. It's just a tough product to carry in a retail store where space is a premium. That square foot has to turn and has to make you money. Games Workshop can do that for you. It's tough for, Civil War miniatures that, you're going to turn that a lot. But there are stores I know that carry historical miniatures. They tend to be in bigger markets or they have a online presence.
All right, really good point. Historical gaming in a store. I mean, honestly, local stores are struggling anyway, especially now with COVID. And he's right, space is absolutely at a premium. I would argue even Games Workshop ain't going to save you, ain't going to keep the doors open. Magic the Gathering will, but, another issue you get with companies is, like, the amount of SKUs you have, and all this different stuff. My local store is utterly fantastic, and the historical gaming, it's a huge store, but since historical gaming is very, very, it's a niche inside of a niche, and so the shelf space just isn't there. Now, he'll order whatever, and that's fine, and that may just be something that we as consumers need to accept. We can hop on, we can hit Amazon or Miniature Market or NWS, whatever, and get it. We can get it cheap and we get it to our house, but we want the local store to stay open. So I really like the fact that I can just order whatever it is, and a lot of it I'll ask, and sometimes I'm surprised. Can you get Saga? Well, turns out, yes, I can. I can get it from this vendor, and so I'll order that for you. And so, yeah, everybody's happy, and that's always good.
I think at the moment there's definitely a growth in historics, and it's been led by companies like Warlord and Battlefront that have made it much easier to get into historics. Some of those companies aren't to everybody's tastes. Some of them play a little bit fast and loose with the hobby and with history, but the games themselves are great because they pull people in from the more science fiction and fantasy backgrounds. It's an easy stepping stone, and from there, then they can explore whatever sort of area.
All right, really good point. That is two companies I've mentioned, and that's Warlord and Battlefront. They are, and they're carrying this historical torch, especially here in the U.S. Locally, that's pretty much we play. That's pretty much it historically in my local store. And even then, it may just be World War II. It may just be bolt action and Flames of War. And occasionally you get in a Black Powder game or something like that. But that's it. But you have people that are like, oh man, I'd really, really want to get into this, that, and the other. Oh, like my friend over at the History on the Tabletop podcast is really wanting to get into 15mm Civil War. But, that's where, okay, which rule set? And, I got this rule set. Now, where do I get, the Irish Brigade, at the Pennsylvania, the 32nd Pennsylvania at Vicksburg, whatever. Who makes those? Well, it turns out, Jim Bob McGee makes it in Saskatchewan, Canada, and he makes perfect little guys that are exactly accurate, and it makes it out of his garage, and there's an 18-month waiting list. So, that's kind of a problem in getting into it. So you really have to kind of dedicate yourself into it. And again, that's what David talked about earlier in there is you would have to, well, now I've got to get the Osprey book to see how to paint these, and I got to do the research for this, for the Orders of Battle, and, this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, that's just not, it has its place, but if you're going to grow, the kids don't find it exciting, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, again, it needs to be somebody doing it all in one I mean, I know it's impossible and it's really expensive and whatever, but man, if you came up with a really good rule set for 15 millimeter Civil War and plastic, miniatures that you sold at a reasonable price here in the U.S., it would probably take off. Now, I completely understand it's like a $1 zillion investment and blah 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 and whatever, but anyway, it's just an idea, just an aside.
What's going on, everybody? It's Joe from God's Eye Games and the Acceptable Casualties here to do a little Q&A for the boys over at Little Wars TV. I don't know if we're necessarily shooting through the roof as far as growing goes, but we're not really losing players either. I know where we're at in the group of guys that I play with. We're pretty steady with what we have. If you look over to the business side, maybe the manufacturing side, as far as how the business is doing right now, I know from our perspective at God's Eye Games, Sons of Mars did really well. So there's obviously people out there that are willing to spend the money and try new rule sets and give things a shot, and that's a good sign for the community in general. We have such a, it's history. We have such a wide variety of stuff, whether it's you want to play, the Age of Samurai, you want to play medievals, you want to play ancients, you want to do World War II, World War One. I mean, there's so many different genres, and, you go to different players in historical wargaming, a lot of us have collections, but we don't have everything covered. So it's kind of hard to find common ground to maybe, set that hook on a newer player. Like, you might have a guy who really enjoys, old school samurai movies or anything like that, and that might be a great way to set the hook, but maybe you don't have that collection, so it's kind of hard to set the hook on that player and be like, hey, you check this out, I got this samurai wargame thing, maybe you should check out, and looking into the hobby. So I think that's another barrier as far as getting newer players into the hobby for wargaming in the historical sense.
All right, really good point, especially with the samurai. Since my local shop started carrying Warlord games, the shop owner noticed that they sell really nice 28 millimeter plastic samurai army. And he was just utterly amazed at the box. He's like, look how big it is. Look how many miniatures come in here. And it's only like, just $100 or whatever. Can you, this is just amazing compared to GW and whatnot. And he's like, hey, Adam, do you know what rule set I can play with these guys with? And I was like, good point. I believe they're listed on the website under the Pike and Shot thing, and he was like, well, blah blah. And I found the PDF. I found the PDF army list for him from Warlord, and he's like, well, what do I do? Do I play him against your new model army or whatever? And I'm like, again, I don't know. I know in 15 millimeter ancients, yes, you would. Well, of course, Pike and Shot is Renaissance, but you can have samurai guys, fighting my Normans and whatever, and yeah, that's really cool. But it's just, that's just kind of a barrier. It's like, this is really neat, but how do I play it? Well, I mean, the other thing is how do I paint it? And that's probably more approachable, but again, how do I play it? Who do I play it against? I mean, does the other person have to get a samurai army, and now we're just doing, the Japanese Civil War or Chinese War of Secession or just whatever. So I really think that's kind of a barrier to kind of get in. I really think nowadays would be a really good time for a 28 millimeter Ancients game to take off, but again, you need to be able to do it all. I don't know, Saga does Dark Ages really well, but again, over here, which I've got local players, I've got several armies. In fact, I just emailed the guy about getting me a copy of Age of Hannibal. Who carries Saga in the US, and I have to find that, or I have to order it from across the pond, and it just takes forever to get here. So, again, just kind of a problem to kind of stoke that fire. And I've noticed, a lot of local guys, a lot of, the Age of Sigmar guys and stuff like that, really like the look of, wow, those Normans are just awesome looking and whatever. And those are knights and those are Vikings and this is cool. Where did you get the figures from? Which, I mean, Gripping Beast often sells, their own little packs and stuff like that. But still, it's not a given. Always, and it's not done kind of that 40K style where they're like, well, this is how you put together these figures, this is how you put together the army and stuff like that. It's not as complex as things used to be, but still it has a little bit of complexity there that just kind of turns these kids off.
Is the hobby growing? Yes. Is the historical wargaming hobby growing? Maybe. I think what's happening is that people are tending to describe themselves more as gamers rather than wargamers, and the type of games that they're playing is diversifying. So yes, they will play historical war games, but they'll also play fantasy war games. They'll also play board games and card games. Is that a negative thing? Well, it's probably neither positive nor negative, but the important thing in there is that as more people are connecting with games as a social hobby rather than sitting at home tapping away at the keyboard, that they are being introduced into historical games as well as other sorts of games.
First of all, he's not fat at all, especially by American standards. Second, I mean, I get it. You're not a war gamer. You're not necessarily a historical gamer. You can just be a gamer. I mean, we are living in the middle of this huge board game renaissance. However, board gaming is still a little bit hard to kind of get a hold of. Now,
I've only got anecdotal evidence for it. I'm sure we're seeing more.
This is, I mean, perfect. I mean, everything is in this box. Everything, you know, you've got your scenarios, you've got the rules, you've got the little counters, all this stuff. It's all there. However, there's no opponent in the box. No opponent. And if you see one in the central Mississippi area, please let me know. I mean, all that to say, I mean, yeah, we're in the middle of a board game renaissance, but still, in my experience, war game opponents are hard to find, and I really think it's because like you said, it is this huge social hobby, but wargaming is just me and the opponent, you know, moving our counters around, versus like a lot of board games are just these 4-6 player, you know, where you just, hey, let's sit down and let's play. And also they don't take that long, you know, in comparison. So maybe that's the kind of thing.
Historical games at shows. That might be just me. And I'm absolutely positive that we're seeing more historical games, or at least games with historical figures. Your mileage may vary on how historical the rules are, but we're certainly seeing a lot more historical figures at our club. When I was first chairman, I would have said that the most popular games were 40k for a while and then War Machine, but it's now very, very definitely Bolt Action, followed by a number of other things which are also historical. So yeah, it's growing a bit. I wouldn't say it's taking over, but there's certainly more historical gaming than there was.
I don't know. I'm assuming that's in the UK. This place where Bolt Action is more popular than 40k and Age of Sigmar. I want to live there. That's where I want to be. But, I mean, it may just be his local club, and yeah, I mean, I completely understand that. But to me, I still see it as kind of like an uphill struggle. But honestly, one of the ways that like Warlord and Battlefront have done so well is almost copying the Games Workshop model of, you know, not only like, you know, selling rules and figures and whatnot, but just like how their army books are put together, and yeah, doing tournaments too. For whatever reason, the kids nowadays love competitive play, and yeah, they want those sweet little, you know, chits or whatever, you know, the giveaway, the limited edition cards, store credit, whatever they want. The kids want it, and they want to fight for it. And so if we can do that by, you know, having my Japanese fight your Italians in Bolt Action, not historically accurate, that I know of, don't at me. But still, fun on the table, and maybe somebody gets that coveted store credit.
The idea that somehow that wargaming, or historical wargaming in particular, is declining, I think is folly, when all the evidence we see says otherwise.
I think the hobby's definitely growing at the moment. We're getting more diversity, getting young people getting involved in the hobby, I think. More women getting involved into the hobby. I think there's also a transference of a lot of people from board wargaming and board games through into the tabletop wargaming as well.
Now, again, I don't know. Maybe it's growing and it's kind of doing really well over in the UK. I think it. I mean, I'm not saying it's doing bad in the U.S. I would say it's doing worse than the UK, and I think what causes that more than anything are the companies are over there. If we had more of a kind of local company doing the miniatures and stuff like that, that would do the push where they go to, all our local stuff. I mean, honestly, more than that, it's the shipping. It's just the availability of it. If we could order it and we could get it fast and all that kind of stuff, I think things would be better over here in the States.
I think that when we look at barriers to a wider audience, I think we're looking at, it's going to be getting people away, off the screen, getting them away from the computer or the console or their handheld device, mobile device, however you want to term it. I've said it many times before, there are so many great aspects about tabletop gaming, especially miniatures tabletop gaming. The artistic aspect, the research aspect, there's more to it than just opening a box and playing. And one of the advantages I think there is to tabletop gaming, especially miniatures gaming, is every person who opens up a tabletop game, especially miniatures game, they make it their own.
Now, okay, with that, I've always kind of hate the, I've always disliked kind of the hating on the video game aspect. I mean, come on, that's not a thing. It's people. I know anecdotally people do both more than anything. I can't tell you like how many guys at my local store are like playing on their Switch while they're waiting on a game, or whatever, or they're just hanging out, just talking, shop rules, whatever, and they're playing their Switch, or shop closes, they go home and they do Call of Duty or whatever. It's just kind of a thing. I mean, I don't see it as kind of a thing where it was like World of Warcraft versus Dungeons and Dragons. That was a whole marketing campaign because they were scared that they were losing role players to the online thing because it was a better experience. Now for war gamers, I mean, it's just not there. This kind of thing honestly is few and far between, online, and or it just damn near non-existent on a console, especially modern console. There just isn't any hex and counter type stuff. But I mean, again, anecdotally, everybody I know that plays those games online plays them in real life too. So I don't think you're losing anything there. And I really don't think you're going to lure the kid who just plays Call of Duty all the time into playing bolt action. I don't know. It's not a thing. I think it needs to be more. If your hobby is real social and the place where you game is really open and accepting, I think that would go a long way. And I mean, that I don't know who that's on. That's kind of on the shop owners and the gamers themselves. You've got to be open to the kids that come in. When they come in and they ask, like, hey, what is that? You've got stop what you're doing and stop the game. I know as hard as that sounds, stop playing right then. Turn around and be like, all right, this is what this is. Because, I mean, that's where you're going to get your next opponent. That's how it's going to grow. I mean, if you're just sitting there like, I'm just playing over here, ignoring that kid. I mean, you're not helping out. You're not helping grow the hobby. I mean, never mind the fact, I mean, it should go without saying, don't be an asshole either. If you've got that guy in your shop, get rid of him. You don't need it. You don't need that guy in your shop. You don't need the personalities there at all. It should be a nice, open, friendly place for, any new players that come in, ladies that come in, men that come in that want to try out this hobby, to try out whatever it is you're playing, be it 15mm American Civil War or bolt action or whatever it is. You've got to be very open and helpful to that next guy that wants to play. And honestly, a lot of companies will bend over backwards to help get their stuff off the ground. You'll get tournament kits, league stuff, all the little goodies and stuff that you can get to encourage people to come out to paint their stuff and all of that. just, I mean, reach out to them. I know locally we did really well with a bolt action league thanks to Warlord. They were super helpful, and it really helped get it off the ground in my area.
Thanks to all of our guests and hobby insiders, including those who we interviewed and didn't appear in this video. We did want to end with Jay Arnold's hopeful optimism, because next week we're going to be back with 5 big, game-changing ideas to shake up the historical wargaming hobby and grow this community.
How do I get to be one of those guys you interviewed that didn't appear in the video? Anyway, head over to the Little Wars YouTube page, like, subscribe, and if you find yourself thinking I have some kind of point or, you know, whatever, you can listen to me. I actually have a podcast that usually comes out about twice a month at right down here, I think somewhere. Yeah, it should be at chancegaming.com. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed listening to me prattle on. And you know, I'm not making fun of Edge there. It was just a joke. No malice intended. You know, live long and a good life, buddy.